Okay, here's another interesting new find from the Aegean Sea on an island depicted here known as Naxos or Nexos. And behind it is a depiction of an early Neanderthal. And it's one of the depictions that they gave, which strangely to me has this look that reminds me of Willow, the movie. And in that light, it says, okay, couple of pieces of face paint, braid your hair, throw in a couple of feathers, and you seem to look very Indian. And if I put a shawl around you and a skin that has fur around the edge of it, we can even start to get Eskimo out of it. But what we're finding, or what they're finding, or have found, and are now further excavating, is that this island here had primordial life on it, and strangely and neatly, there's an island attached to it in this set of islands that's not too far out. It's pretty much swimmable to it. But then rocks were used to attach two smaller islands together, and so on. I'll show you that in a video here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and get into this. For early human remains migrated to the Greek islands 200,000 years ago. Now that's not Neanderthals, but we are going to talk about them having done the same. Scientists have proven early humans migrated through the Mediterranean much earlier than currently believed. There's my tagline. A team of international scientists led by Tristan Carter, an associate professor of anthropology at McMaster University, has today published new evidence proving that the Greek island of Naxos was populated with Neanderthals and early humans 200,000 years ago, and as much as 250,000 years ago, he'll reveal in the video that I show to you. Hopefully it doesn't cut it. Which is tens of thousands of years earlier than currently held, but this is only the tip of an iceberg in a paper which quite literally tips anthropology on its head. For we had this idea that humans didn't have boats, and I've shown you this idea that we didn't have boats just 5 or 6,000 years ago. Then there's confirmed paintings on walls at 16,000 years ago, 22,000 years ago at Kamyana and other places. And then somebody got smart enough to just realize that, well, the Aborigines got there, and that's 58,000 years ago. And they got there somehow to the islands, and now we played with the old models of everything on how this, the sea drops at maximum. We have a global maximum, we have a global minimum whenever we're in an ice age, and it sucks up all the moisture and keeps it up in these ice ages. As it melts away, it fills back up the ocean. I think most of the people understand that are watching. But, the strange correlation to the end of the last ice age. Now, the last ice age started over 100,000 years ago. But these people go back to much before that. So what was their extent at some point before the last ice age, leading into it, and then what happened to humanity after the last ice age? And I'm trying to piece that together for you in a few strange ways and a few little strings of a thread that attach to the web that we've been talking about. For I try to hover mainly back in the age just before recorded time and try to make attachments. And to be honest, it goes 18, 16, 18, 22, 30 something, 38, it just starts drifting back. And what I find lacking so much in that is that when we talk about that, we're gapping 8,000 years. Well, if we look back 8,000 years from now, we didn't have recorded history at 6,000 BC. So these jumps and these lags, and I'm trying to find little pieces all to put it together in this little puzzle, and what was going on where, and so on. And this is one good point out that shows that while we had an idea and then people founded it and put it in stone almost, a little bit later, a lot of things have been found. And it's strange that in school books and things that we still have stuff that has been totally reworked and debunked 50 years ago, and it's still in the book. So is the teacher given extra criteria that she like, okay, when it gets to this part, then I say this sentence. When it gets to that part, I say this sentence. No, there's none of that. Huh. Well, you can just go on being misinformed, and I think that's a travesty, Hey, whenever I was in school, I wasn't the greatest about history. No, there were certain things that I wanted to know about and other things that I didn't. And it took a bit for me to become real good at memorizing things and, making up little deals to memorize in Ocean Blue, 1492, and all those things that you hear and stuff. And literally, it still is a problem somewhat with me. I can't, attaching to exacting dates and blah, blah, blah. It's one of the reasons I don't like modern history and so far back. Because, I'll misdate something by 20 years and somebody will totally lose their mind. And rightfully so, because they've got it, dictated down to a certain point. But whenever I stay in elder times, I'm talking about it's a floating period that we're talking about, and we can get a visual about it. But sometimes when we talk about it, it seems to go back through this fog, and you're really only seeing it in your mind like a movie. You know what I'm talking about? And I try to make that fog go away a little bit. Neanderthals used to look so clubbish and everything, and we're realizing that they didn't, and that some of the earliest forms even didn't. And so this rapidly coming out of a primate form and turning into something is much more misleading still to this day in concepts. I saw Clan of the Cave Bear. I don't know if you've ever seen this. It talks about Ayla, and she is a Caucasian blonde-haired girl. It's Daryl Hannah, and she plays in this movie where they're basically all Neanderthals, and somehow she pops up, gets adopted by them, and then ends up having a kid, other things. It takes off and starts a new life and has to find others, and she gives the sign, knowledge, and the sun back to her and everything. And it's weird, they don't have any real speech. It's just all in ugh and noises and things, and they have it written down in concepts. And this one guy that can count more than 5, and then Ayla says, well, this is 20, and shows him groups of 5, and it just blows his mind, and it shows that this way that possibly that it was different, right? But different in some ways, different in others, and we're finding that there weren't so vast a difference between them. Let's go on. Tristan Carter was the lead author of a new study which published today in the Journal of Sciences, Science Advances, and I need to check that out. Couldn't find it. So, and this is almost a month old. So I'm going to have to try to find it someplace else. Or subscribe to the Journal of Advanced Sciences. No, you should be able to find references to this paper. I mean, it gets put out professionally. But in this fascinating scientific project directly challenges current thinking about early human movements to territories that were previously considered uninhabitable. Essentially, the new study is demanding that researchers in evolutionary sciences now reconsider their models of how our early ancestors moved out of Africa and into Europe, and it also provides new data about how our ancestors adapted to new environmental changes and when this happened. For recently, just if you watch some of my videos in this year, we've seen that they have found, well, we used to think that in the era of Ethiopia, they had found a modern human at 208, 215,000 years, give or take 8, but Now we found that Jebel Erud, which was showing promise and showing up to that dating also, showing ancient hominids, caucasoids, that it now dates to 315,000 BC. So if we hadn't had that Jebel Erud find, this would show that there's a similar dating in time. And if we can find some just a little bit older than this, then the oldest modern human is actually not in Africa, but out of Africa. Isn't that strange how it can float? Africa's a bottleneck where it goes into it. But imagine it's a bottleneck only if you're trapped on land. If you're able to get in a boat and go out from land to this island that you're looking at right here, across that water, and find a way across. Who knows what happens? I tell you that in ancient cultures, they used to put the dead inside of a tree trunk and float them off. Things like this, right? That led all these sailors during pirate times to think that sharks were incessantly attack anything floating on the water and stuff, and all these stories about it and everything too. And they had talked about that even in that. So at that time, they knew about these ideals that people would go, and we can find a lot of burials that I've shown where it's in a log. There's this in Denmark, Scandinavian area in Denmark, where it has an Egyptian beads in it with some amber beads and some other stuff, but verified Egyptian beads from the time of King Tut in that, and it's a disintegrated log burial, and it's sarcophagus. It's essentially in its processes and acidity of woods and so on that went on, it ends up eating the flesh and turning it into a skeleton. Well, there's twofold of that idea too, before people are letting bodies be eaten by birds. And even the Greeks talked about some people letting animals get a hold of them and everything before they take them back from them and then bury them, and they would keep the head and do certain things. And this is certain separate cultures, but we're looking at a vast area of time of what people were doing over a long, long period of time. Like I've talked about red ochre burials, red ochre symbology in art and in burials. And it connects, going all the way through into Egyptian times, Greek art, Minoans, Mitanni, but just before in that age, in those areas. In Anatolia, these Canaanite burials that showed them laying on their side, facing the east, swathed in red ochre. We can see that symbology shown in the American Indians too. And then people get a disconnect on that, and I tell you, well, you say the American Indians came from Asia and went across the Bering Bridge. I'm telling you, they had this before they left. It's that simple. They had the swastika. They had the other symbology. They had much of this knowledge before they even went over. It's an easiest way to explain it, and some people can't fathom. It's like an Eskimo did what? And it's like, well, before these people were in the Eskimo area, they were a different people. They went across the bridge. Yeah. Anyhow, let's get on to this more, for they're showing you all these sites that they found. And there are buildings and modern buildings in here, but they are founding in some of these places and on some of these islands very vastly different things than what was recently taught and what a lot of people currently think if they're caught up in current dogma. It's time for a colossal rethink. In this groundbreaking paper, evidence is presented of a human activity spanning almost 200,000 years, and in fact he says 250, up to 250, but anyhow, at a prehistoric quarry on the northwest coast of Naxos near Stellida. Oh, well, maybe there's just this site shows just under 2,000. So it's not just this, because I'm talking about, okay, all right, now I see what it is. This is derived from that one paper of this one place. I'm talking about the correlated paper from all the areas around the Aegean. And if they could do some aquatic archaeology, you could look at that stone circle that's out in the Aegean that's right over near this island, not too far away, that I show in this video that I've done with Bob Ballard, and how he was looking for a warship someplace and raked right across this thing, and he figured out it's got to be over 9,000 years old from the depth, from what they say and everything, but it's even more than that. For the Mediterranean area used to be sunk in much farther, and it got inundated, right? Just like we know that the Black Sea eventually, with the Mediterranean being so, it inundated it and flooded it in, and it was much lower, and it was fresh water, right? Complete verification. So I'll show you something that goes with that here shortly. Scientists' key evidence was gathered from luminescence dating, which placed 9,000 artifacts in a strategic sequence from 13,000 to 200,000 years ago. Tristan Carter told a McMaster University press release that the new evidence forced a complete rethink of the history of the Mediterranean islands. For a while, it's accepted that Stone Age hunter-gatherers lived on mainland Europe for over 1 million years, and the Aegean Sea and Mediterranean islands were thought to have been settled only 9,000 years ago, or around 6,400 BC, 6,700. Here comes Crete, and yeah, that's what we're led to think. Because seafaring vessels did not exist before this time. Now that's strange, because just last week, I don't know when I'm going to put this one out compared to it, but just last week I did one on an ancient boat dock found on the Isle of Wight, and it's below about 35 foot of water, but it didn't used to be. And when was it even above water? Correlating the dating too of the wood, and it's 8,000 BC that this would have been able to be on the shore of anything. And it's a boat dock that is huge, immense. They say over 2 football fields, and it wraps around a whole cove area or something. I really am anticipating a CGI type video to come out soon that'll show this site. For when I first came out from the info, it was interesting, but then I found another, so I've done 2 videos even on this, because another video showed where they got Randall Carlson, right? He's a Santa Claus Zeus. Yep. They got him to come on a station and verify this and talk about it and its correlations. And they go out in left field a little bit, but there was the verifier on it too. Of course, it was verified for the paper was even out, but it's a secondary verifier, and kind of with what I'm saying, but it added to it even more. So it made a good one. And whenever more info comes out on that, we're going to be all over it. So here's some of these artifacts that they found, and even from pin screws made like awls, perhaps to punch leather, perhaps to spin and cut a hole through things and stuff like that, of this granite and quartzite type rocks and flint that are here. And this is just a glimpse of it. There's a bunch, and they'll show some in the videos. Video that I'll show at the end of it. Hopefully I don't have to clip it up or do anything. Artifacts from the excavation of Naxos, where early humans migrated before previously believed. Tag mark. Scholars who held that the Aegean Sea of Western Anatolia, or modern-day Turkey, we call it, from continental Greece was impassable to hominids and Neanderthals, maintained that they passed in and out of Europe across the land bridge of Thrace, southeast Balkan area, and there's a connective that runs across right there, right, and into Asia Minor, and that's where it had happened, over there right off the Caucasus Mountains and stuff, where the Colchians used to live, and and let's continue. But this new study shows the Aegean basin was accessible around 200,000 years earlier than currently believed. So what they're almost proposing, if you can grasp it, we go through a couple of ice ages, right? They're saying at the low maximum of the last ice age, this is whenever it was happening. Like 30,000 years ago now, but more like 230,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, these people were doing these things. Earlier than currently believed. Neanderthal navigators? Well, at certain periods during the Ice Age, sea levels were much lower than previously thought, and the researchers discovered land routes between the continents that would allow the prehistoric people to walk across Stellita. Well, or Stellita. It's like Stella, But I've shown a video, God, it's been over 2 years ago now, 3 at least. Yeah, close to 3. Must be somewhere in there. Of somebody else's CGI video that they had done of the inundating of the Mediterranean and how low that was, as it was fresh, salted water kind of, and way deeper low than it was until it became inundated. And it only became inundated whenever the ocean rose up enough and came into it. And it seems like it corresponded with an event that we keep talking about. Using these alternative migration routes connecting Africa with Europe, early humans would have valued what the scientists refer to as an abundance of raw materials for tool making and lots of fresh water. And so kind of here's the area that we're looking at. And people know about Thrace, and this is where you can connect, right? Well, whenever the ocean was down, like what I was telling you about in the time of Bob Ballard's Circle, which is actually somewhere right in here, I think. Wait. Wouldn't that be... Yeah, I'm sorry. It would be over here. I think it would be over here. But you see the grayish-green area, not the green dots, but the grayish-green area. That is at seawater low minimum what would have also been exposed other than this. And so what we're looking at is just the mountaintops and what's left on the mountaintops. And because these were a coastal people, we don't find so much. And man, if you could suck up about a third of the ocean again without causing an ice age, and we could take a look in that swimming pool at the bottom of the swimming pool, or at least this area, then we could go back. Now what they've realized now, which I showed in that older video that I was talking about, and I did 2 of them, is that this was trapped and separate, and there was a giant lake in here, connected to a giant lake in here, connected to a giant lake in here. And the reason you see this pass, it comes here, is that these were connected at one time way before, but aren't now. But after the ocean fills back up and this fills up, that breaks right back through, and there it goes right to the Black Sea, and it fills it back up. But these sites that they have found, there's one down here on this island, there's one in this island, there's one in this island, one in this island. And while there are some sites connected to land, these are all islands and could only have been there during certain times. And so the knee-jerk response was to say, well, it's our nearest time, right? It's our nearest time. But as they layered this thing, they ran into old Mousterian type tools. And they're like, well, that's Neanderthals. Well, how long have they been here? And they just kept digging down, and it gave a layered effect. And down through the layers, they kept finding artifacts. When's it going to end? It's like that Galt, Texas site, whenever they told them, you don't dig farther than 5 foot. But people had already dug that pit down about 10, 12 foot, and somebody went and dug 3 or 4 foot more, and hey, man, look at these weird things. There's a different kind of arrowhead. So no one thinks to maybe look for prehistoric sites on an island, or to even go to such lengths. But hey, one got exposed, and then aha, people start taking a look, and it's amazing what we start to find. So that landmass is around 250 to 300,000 years ago. This gray area, see that gray area, 250 to 300,000 years ago. So while they're talking 200-ish, they can't make this a reality unless they go back 250 to 300,000 years ago. Right? And there are modern humans dated in this spot, which would have been proto-Caucasians, Caucasoids. And the researchers also suggest that pre-Neanderthal populations would have been present with new challenges in unknown environments with different animals, plants, and diseases, which all have required the development of new adaptive strategies, says Carter. But what really gets called the question by the new study is that the actual importance of the coastal and marine routes to human movement. And while the Aegean is commonly thought of as having been crossed by foot over 200,000 years ago, this study raises the possibility that Neanderthals and humans, modern humans, may also have fashioned crude seafaring boats. And I've been trying to tell you this and trying to show you as much evidence as I can, but wood rots long ago. They beat us to it. These new findings support a 2012 study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science that presented evidence of early Neanderthal seafaring activity in the southern Ionian Islands and the Mediterranean Sea, and I mentioned that in the other video. Neanderthals are generally considered to be a subspecies or coexistent species of modern humans or separate species altogether, and they lived from approximately 300,000 years ago to somewhere near 24,000 years ago, occupying all of Europe and extending into Western Asia. Now, let me see if I can catch you at a different time here. For if you're around 60, 50, 45 probably years old, you would have this idea that modern humans showed up maybe 30, 35,000 years ago. Neanderthals predate us a whole lot, right? Homo sapiens didn't show up till much, much later, and when we showed up, we mated with them just slightly, and then after that, we kept going, right? But no, well, no, we're finding that they only go back some 300,000 years, right? And modern human goes back 315,000 years. It's reaching up on him, reaching up on him quite a bit. Coexistence. Whereas a lot of people probably, if they even don't have that long, think that it was, well, there was Neanderthals, then there was Cro-Magnons, then there was modern humans. Is that the one you got? Well, the genetics in Cro-Magnon are still existent today. But whenever they say modern humans, that's the modern anatomically correct human that is Homo sapiens, that goes back 315,000 years ago, and over 200,000 years right here in these things. And they're not just starting out, but they're island hopping. Just to interject that. But with George Ferentinos and college findings, 100,000-year-old Neanderthal stone tools on islands in the Mediterranean Sea, we now know they had figured out how to travel by boat. Ta-da! So here's just some of the working and everything, and this is weird. It's a kind of layered, almost geode type effect that's in a rock, but it's been worked and chipped, and they're showing a lot of others. But that's one of the stripe types. It's a chert tool. To put this technologically advancement into perspective, while Neanderthal people were sailing about 100,000 years ago, the first archaeological evidence of modern humans sailing dates back to just 60,000 years ago, when the first landings were made on Australia. So far, that's the earliest we have so far. What must be changed now, though? Well, the old Encyclopedia Britannica, for starters. I checked out today and it still says Neanderthals inhabited Eurasia from the Atlantic regions of Europe eastward to Central Asia from as far north as the present-day Belgium and as far south as Mediterranean and southwest Asia. It now needs to be updated, including islands in the Aegean Sea. But this is also going to change a whole lot more. For, I guess we're going to have evidence of boating. Somehow we can't find a boat, but these people did not swim. They're swimmers, and there definitely are. And I've showed you in Mermaids of the Green Sahara, there are these people that are swimming like fish. They even show them with fish tails. It's the mermaid depiction. I entice you to look that up. Mermaids of the Green Sahara, Neptunes Lagoon. Look up on my site. It's interesting. It shows you some of the cave art that's there, and whenever the Sahara was green and water was flowing through there, and the way the people were. But this is going to change a lot of other things too. But how long is it going to change? For right there, he mentions how even the Encyclopedia Britannica doesn't even have an update on this, but it doesn't have an update on a lot of more things. And the Denisovan finds that we found, and so on. I'm guessing that they need to put people in charge of updating these correctly and going off of the clinical data somehow. Archaeologists have long known that Europe had been populated with pre-Neanderthal hominids, such as Homo erectus and Homo heidelbergensis, and that Neanderthals live continental Greece and Turkey, but it never occurred to anyone to actively hunt down archaic human remains on Aegean islands, for ancient humans were never thought of as seafarers. But it does go back much earlier than people thought. It's kind of weird, but let me see if I get you another catch here. You're taught that no one knew how to go on the boats at all, but somehow these great boats are all built by these Phoenicians, and they're going around doing it. No one else has a boat. They don't know what the hell's going on. They don't know where the Phoenicians are going. They don't know what's going on. Later, some boats that look just like that show up in Vikings. And the Romans kind of mimicked them in between and made ramming boats too, right? So we know about that. And they had reed boats in Egypt, so they could scoot about in calm waters on a reed boat. Right. Thor Heyerdahl made it across to the Americas in a reed boat, like a Sumerian reed boat that predates the others. So this new paper shows that they could have crossed marshes on foot during lower glacial periods of ice age when the seawater was trapped in glaciers. And I tell you that they're trying to grip onto the idea, well, let's find the lowest maximum point, and then we'll just try to all date the first of that and say that they came across on the march, became trapped, and that's it, somehow or something, and convergently built themselves up. But you see off in the, you can barely see, but in the distance you can see these little islands from this island. Somebody took and made a boat type thing and went off to that island. Oh, did I mention we're on an island right now taking a picture, looking out at other islands? Just like in the ancient tale of Atlantis and onward, there are islands, and beyond more islands. It is believed that the Aegean sea levels allowed for migration to Naxos. Finally, while human factors and implications connected with this new paper are indeed interesting, perhaps the most revealing aspect is that the Aegean Sea simply didn't exist, and the territory which much later became the island of Naxos was an extension of the rest, just a harder walk. And so now whenever we look at this idea here that the Aegean Sea didn't really exist, for this blocks off with this mountain range and it was freshwater at one time through here and here. But before, the time before time, it had leaked out through here and cut away. And once this got filled up enough, it broke through the Bosphorus Strait and inundated it to a much higher point. Many people correlate that to the biblical tale, for there were so many important people living around that exact area that seemed to have been dispersed just after. Let's look at that video clip I promised. See that land bridge there?
Welcome. I'm Dr. Tristan Carter at McMaster University from Canada. I'm co-director of the Stolida Naxos Archaeological Project, along with my colleague, Dr. Dimitrios Athanasoulis of the Greek Ministry of Culture. The archaeological site of Stolida was first discovered in 1981. But since then, however, very little work has been done here. And the work that has been done has tantalizingly suggested that this could be quite an early site. But this is a controversial claim. And the only way we can resolve this problem is by undertaking a full-scale archaeological excavation and getting scientific dates to show exactly how old it is and to characterize the nature of activity here. We are currently the only excavation that's scientifically clarifying how early this Mediterranean history goes.
Well, you didn't catch that probably, but they are currently with the team of people that are dating their earliest and seeing how far it goes back, and our fixing to set the new standard is basically what he's saying.
However, recent work in Crete and a few of the other Mediterranean islands are suggesting that in fact there was a much earlier history to the peopling of the islands in the Mediterranean.
And this is what I was indicating about the other sites, and it's showing the other dots that are on there, but there are even more than that now that are being investigated, and people are starting to think of going back to some elder sites that showed promise and taking a deeper look.
What we found in 2013 and 14 were a huge number of stone tools, some of which we argued, on the basis of what they looked like and how they were made, that they might have ranged in time from the lower Paleolithic to the Mesolithic, something like 250,000 to 9,000 years ago.
And there you get the verification of the date that I was saying right at the very start of it, and these type of tools. Now, unless you want to say they invented that type of tool work and it came out of there, well, no, we've got the sites that are a little older than that that have this type of effect. Okay, well, then it's verified.
So that's why we started excavating. Our job now is to find these tools in their original position and to get scientific dates to show exactly when people were here and what they were doing. We have an idea at the moment that we have early Homo sapiens, i.e. more earlier versions of us, modern humans. But also, there are good suggestions that there were Neanderthals here.
And I want to break in right here to show you, we have the indication these were all early humans. There was also Neanderthals.
And their ancestors. And for these earlier characters, we're also interested in how they got here.
So I should have let that go to that sentence, and I apologize. But yeah, the earliest ancestors and how they got there. And so I'm very interested in the paper and what comes out of that, and some knowledge that comes out of that, and correlation and correlative data. And what I'm really interested in is they dug it down and went in here and they, well, where are you finding some Neanderthal at? And are they coexistive at the same time? And was there one here and then there was another? Does it look like one took over from the other? Does it look like one abandoned it and the other showed up, and the other one, if he ever showed up again, never did take it back over and decided that that's just about it? Could go on about Neanderthals right now, but let's continue.
So one of our main questions is who was here and when they were here.
And that's the main question for everybody.
It's very important for us to have space to train the next generation of scholars, undergraduate and young graduate students alike. If you want to keep updated as to what we're doing, then check in here on a regular basis. We'll tell you about it.
And I'd like to show also, because I'm using his footage, these people that work with this area. And this strangely looks like somebody I know. Vastly like somebody I know very well.